Hello, and it's time for Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Big couple of weeks ahead for both shows, because not only is AEW doing Fyter Fest for the next 2 weeks, not to be outdone, NXT last week announced that their next 2 weeks of programming will be Great American Bash flavored. So basically 4 combined shows of what's advertised or what's assumed to be pay-per-view / takeover quality matchups. So who wins night 1? We're about to find out. But first, as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, and buy the shirt that says so. NXT begins the women's 4-way elimination match to see who will be the next #1 contender for Io Shirai's women's championship. You have Tegan Nox, Dakota Kai, Candice LeRae, and Mia Yim. I think Yim is the real MVP of this matchup because she's all over the place here. First off, she does eliminate Candice. She's the first one to take her out. Cool little moment where Dakota has got Tegan in a leg lock, and Yim puts a guillotine on Dakota to try and break that hold. Look at that, she's all over the place here, but ultimately Dakota pins Yim after an O'Connor roll against the ropes, and so it's down to the longtime friends turned rivals, Kai and Nox, and there's a lot of great back and forth with this one as well. Tegan powers out of Dakota's submission finisher, hits the Molly Go Round and the Shiniest Wizard to win the match. So I'm really excited about the prospect of a Tegan Nox Io Shirai championship match, but I'd say it was a really strong opener. I think everyone did a really good job. Damian Priest was what I would argue is probably his best promo to date. He didn't do a whole lot in this thing, but I believed in his conviction. I believed in his delivery with this one, as opposed to what felt like kind of overly scripted or just kind of stuffy, awkward promo delivery from him in the past. He talks about Cameron Grimes, says, you slashed my tires and you beat me up, but you don't own up to it. You don't admit to any of this. So he makes a challenge to Cameron and basically says, no more tricks, no more games. And like I said, I think it was actually a really nice Damian Priest promo. Up next, good old T-Thatch, Timothy Thatcher taking on Oney Lorcan in a match that Lorcan had repeatedly asked for, so he's getting it here tonight. Lots of mat grappling and submission-based stuff for the bulk of this match, really playing to both of their strengths before it's occasionally punctuated, though, by more powerful moves in the interim. They start trading many blows here until finally Oney makes his comeback when he's hit one too many times. Does a big old fire up here. He tries to fishhook Thatcher in the mouth, but Tim grabs the arm, turns it into the Fujiwara armbar for Oney to tap. Thatcher puts a little bit extra mustard on it after the bell rings, and that's pretty much how it ends. That was a good showcase for Thatcher here. I think he's been presented very well since debuting on TV as kind of like the reluctant partner in Matt Riddle. They break up. He did lose that first match, and then he has a very dominant comeback with the Fight Pit match, sends Riddle off packing from NXT, and now he's got this, the Thatch can stuff I thought was kind of I thought that was interesting, and now this, big win against Oney Lorcan just further cements his status. I think he's doing a great job right now. It's a good showcase for both guys. A match of this style is not everyone's cup of tea because it does kind of slow down a lot, but I think that if you kind of follow the story of just the holds and the counter holds and anything, it's easy to get into that way. We get a high package for Karrion Kross, very spooky, very threatening, and then we go to our next match as Rhea Ripley takes on Aaliyah and Robert Stone in a handicap match. I believe it's actually Stone's in-ring debut for NXT, and if he and Aaliyah win the match, then Rhea must join the Robert Stone brand. I love how Stone hams it up here. It's classic manager shtick. He's got the boxing gear on and the mouthpiece and the goggles for some reason. He's taken down very quickly by Rhea early on, so it's actually kind of Aaliyah and Rhea for one-on-one basically for a lot of the match. At one point, Rhea kicks the soul out of Aaliyah, just kicks her right in the sternum, and she collapses into the ropes, knocking Stone off the apron. Eventually, the two baddies are able to get some work over on Rhea, a double submission kind of work here, but Rhea is just too strong. We get a headbutt into the balls spot. Stone tries to roll her up in the schoolboy, but he can't do it, and she's too strong. And finally, she makes them tap out simultaneously with a double prism trap, which is pretty creative. I think, I was really looking forward to a few weeks of a begrudging Rhea Ripley having to be a member of the Robert Stone brand, but we can't always get what we want. I thought it was a goofy match, but I think it was a good one nonetheless. In the first ever strap match in NXT, Roderick Strong taking on the source of his nightmares as of late, Dexter Loomis, who of course last month at Takeover in Your House stuffed Roddy into the trunk of a car during that backlot brawl, and so now he's facing his fears here in the strap match. And Roderick really wants to try and run off, but Loomis won't let him. He's very dominant early on here. They fight their way to the stage, and I didn't mention this at the beginning. I guess the part of the set for the Great American Bash are these just two fancy sports cars. because America. And so they're fighting, and Loomis like opens the trunk to one of them, and that causes the fighter flight for Roddy here. He mounts a big comeback after that. Eventually, Bobby Fish comes in with a cheap shot on Loomis, but it's not enough to put him away. He runs into the ring and then gets clotheslined by the strap for his troubles. Loomis is able to hit the side effect and then wrap the strap around Roddy's neck and put him in the silence, that head and neck choke of his, to win the match. I am really glad that Loomis won this matchup. I think he needed a big win right now because lately he's been kind of portrayed as like a big, strong brute, but ultimately can't win a lot of big matches. So to see him win a match like this in as dominant fashion as he did, I thought was very impressive. I think that, you know, I say this before, I think not all strap matches are created equal. Some have a hard time like working the strap to their advantage, and I think they did a good job with that here. We get a high package for the Adam Cole-Keith Lee match for next week, and they do a really good job showing like, hey, for the last year, these guys have both done really well. Like, imagine that, like two guys who win the bulk of their matches, and like, don't you want to see them fight and see who's the better man? Like, wow, it's amazing booking. And then backstage, you see an upset Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae over what happened in the four-way. Candice runs out of the shot to start fighting Mia Yim, and I love Johnny here. He's like, wow, she's the best. And then like he runs down the hallway, and Isaiah Swerve Scott's trying to break it up, and Johnny gets in his face. And so we find that there's going to be a street fight, you know, next week at Great American Bash Part 2 between the ladies. We get Legato del Fantasma in the ring. Santos Escobar saying that for too long, the historic luchador tradition has been disrespected and turned into a sideshow. Luchadors aren't just guys in masks doing flips. That's right, Santos. They slap their legs a lot too. He says that, you know, he and his crew will right the wrongs of those who have disrespected luchadors, and they will build their empire. Drake Maverick shows up rocking a neck brace. He foolishly runs into the ring and he gets got by all three guys. Then Breezango come in and make the save, and then Fandango on the mic challenges those guys to a six-man for next week. I thought it was a nice little segment setting up their match. One thing I think both shows did well this week, but that NXT did better, was that at the end of the day, it's still TV, and you're still like advertising for the next week of stuff, and you gotta find ways to do that. So there's like, I think NXT this week had a really healthy mix of like wrestling and talking for a change. It's not very often you see that kind of healthy balance. Cameron Grimes is backstage. He responds to Damian Priest's challenge by not really acknowledging, and says that, you know, Cameron's doing great these days, and in fact, he's issuing a challenge to the winner of the Cole-Keith Lee match for some point in the future. So will he get that shot or not? Time will tell, but it seems that the eventual matchup with him and Damian Priest still on the table. In your main event, non-title match, as Io Shirai takes on Sasha Banks, a match that was made by way of social media promos. Basically, Io was saying that she built NXT into what it is today. Sasha disagrees, and here we go. Not enough cars in this set. Let's bring one more fancy car out there as Sasha Banks and Bayley arrive in style. I do like Sasha's USA-themed attire for the Great American Bash. Really good look there. This match is really great. I think it's really lived up to the hype and the expectations that came with it when this match was first announced. They're just really bringing their A game here. At one point, Sasha with a sunset flip powerbomb to Io onto the plexiglass wall. In the end, Io's got the bank statement locked onto Sasha, but some trickery by Bayley and one of the tag belts allows her to get a cheap shot on Io. Out comes from under the ring Asuka to spray the poison mist in Sasha's face, which allows Io to capitalize, hits the palm strike and a moonsault to win the match. I thought this was just a great contest here. I think it was a really clever way to build the conflict between, you know, Asuka and Sasha for their match at Extreme Rules for the title. I think it was just a really well done match, and it was a really great main event. It's time for night one of AEW's Fyter Fest, and Chris Jericho in his best Canada Day outfit. By the way, happy Canada Day. He joins commentary for the first portion of the evening. MJF wearing what could best be described as my mother's bathrobe as he and Wardlow make their way to the ring for their match with the Jurassic Express. MJF on the mic beforehand takes a shot at the late Luke Perry, and then he also says, you know, we're in a ratings war, so who better for your front line than MJF? It's actually the first time Wardlow and MJF have teamed up in an official capacity in AEW, so that's an interesting little footnote there. Some good work by the heels as they just work over poor Jungle Boy, but he makes a very athletic hot tag to Luchasaurus, who's all over his opponents. Jungle Boy tags back in as a big run. Jericho going to CMLL mode on commentary as he's screaming in Spanish. Jungle Boy hits MJF with a Super Canadian Destroyer as Jericho flips out and screams Happy Canada Day for one of the 8 or 9 times at least he does it through the course of the evening. But yeah, Jungle Boy jumps off of both Wardlow and Luchasaurus's backs as they're on their all fours, and then it's Canadian Destroyer. That's a nice little spin on that. Marco Stunt gets involved, but he is hurled into Jungle Boy by Wardlow. Luchasaurus looking very tough here. He's kicking out of a lot of things that's thrown his way. MJF brings up the diamond ring and some miscommunication. He hits Wardlow by accident, and then a very resilient Wardlow is ultimately taken down by both members of Jurassic Express, and the good guys win here. So I think it was a really great opener as well. I think that MJF, him losing this match in an official capacity, but he's still not pinned or submitted. I think, it's more of like, it's more heat for him, and he's going to egg on. He's going to make a big deal out of that. So yeah, I think it served its purpose, and I think that the rivalry between MJF and Jungle Boy, and now expanding through, to their friends and everything, I think is doing really well here, and Wardlow looks great. Next week after Fyter Fest, they're going to have an AEW Puppy Battle Royal. It's going to be their equivalent of the Puppy Bowl. I'm there for it. I'm ready for that one. And then we see a little scrap in the stands between Joey Janela and Lance Archer. They're going to be wrestling officially next week. And then we go to our next match for the Women's Championship as Hikaru Shida defends against Penelope Ford. Kip Sabian is ejected right from the get-go, but he takes Shida's kendo stick on his way out. More on that later, I'm sure. Shida looks good early on against Ford until she's kicked in the face, and then Penelope takes over. Looks great on the offensive here. At one point, Shida hits the Falcon Arrow, and Ford rolls her right up and almost wins it. Penelope's really giving Hikaru a run for her money in this matchup. Ford even bends backward to avoid a top rope crossbody, hits a stunner and another kick out. Kip Sabian gets involved, and there's him with that kendo stick. But it's funny because Shida hits Kip as a Smash Brothers-esque, tosses the weapon in the air, and there's a lot of hang time before Shida grabs it and hits Kip instead. Ford even hits a lethal injection, and Shida's able to kick out of that. Ford misses the moonsault. She takes 2 big knees, a second Falcon Arrow, and she kicks out of that one, another big knee, and Shida finally wins. My God, that match was great. And I think it really gave Io Shirai and Sasha Banks a run for its money. If we're just comparing women's match to women's match here, I think Shida looked great. Ford looked great. I mean, she's been really, I think, performing very well in the last several weeks, last several months probably. But yeah, I think the match was great. I loved it. TNT title up next as Cody defends against Jake Hager, and I loved Cody's t-shirt for his entrance. It says the American Nightmare Cody, but it looks like that old Great American Bash logo. I thought that was just perfection. The match starts off with a lot of fundamentals. Every time Cody's able to mount some kind of momentum, it's quickly snuffed out by the much stronger Jake Hager, and Mrs. Hager gets involved as well. She steps and walks on Cody's back with her 8-inch stilettos, and she also slaps Cody later on as well. Hager goes after Arn Anderson at one point, and when Cody tries to break it up, Hager Germans him onto the floor. And then after that horrific looking bump, we see the Hagers saying hi to their kids on TV during the commercial break. That was very wholesome. Cody gets a comeback thanks to some help from Arn on the outside. It's a great big Cody cutter. He also goes up top a bit later, but then Hager suplexes him right off. He gets Cody in the ankle lock, and Cody gets the ropes, and then there's that slap I mentioned earlier from Mrs. Hager. That prompts Dustin Rhodes to show up and hit Hager with a cheap shot, but he's able to still put the head and arm choke onto Cody, but Cody rolls through it and covers Jake to actually win the matchup. Hager thinks he's won the match, but he's very much mistaken, and he KOs the ref with one punch after being told of the decision. I thought it was another solid match, a lot of big ebbs and flows that I could get behind. I think that there was almost a bit too much interference on both sides for my liking, but I did really like the finish. Orange Cassidy, wearing his blood-stained shirt from last week, makes his way to the announce table and just sits on the opposite end from Jericho, who is just apoplectic that Orange is even in his presence, but he tries to remain calm. As we go to our next matchup here, Private Party with Matt Hardy taking on Santana and Ortiz. I mean, this match has got the flips and the dips, and it's good on that front, but I feel like my energy was kind of sapped out from after that last match, and I feel the crowd might agree with me because they were definitely a lot less quiet for this one, I would say. The guys that are working their butts off, though. Private Party win after they hit the gin and juice on Santana, after they pull the bandana over his eyes. I thought the match was okay, but I think I've seen nothing more spectacular than what we've seen from either team in the past. I thought it was a good kind of recovery match, though. Then after the match, Jericho loses his shit toward Orange and lunges after him, and immediately people show up from out of the woodwork to create kind of a pull-apart brawl. And I get the humor of the pull-apart brawl, and Orange Cassidy is just Pineapple Pete's barely holding on to him, and Jericho's being held by 5 or 6 guys screaming, next week! Next week! And it's funny on that level, but it's I think the pull-apart brawl can be kind of it's a good, effective tool when it's done well. And I think when you're kind of taking the piss out of that, I think that it kind of ruins the pull apart for me personally. Paige and Omega cut a promo backstage. Hangman says he respects the best friends, but when it comes to defending the titles, all bets are off. Omega says they've been so dominant thus far, and tonight will be no different. They announced that 2 weeks from tonight, so 2 weeks after a week after night 2 of Fyter Fest, we're going to have Fight for the Fallen. So 3 weeks in a row of themed shows for AEW, which makes me think that NXT is going to do the same exact thing 2 weeks from tonight. And they announced that at that show that they have moved the Jon Moxley-Brian Cage title match scheduled for next week to 1 week later. Probably has something to do with, the precautions for COVID and everything. And that prompts Taz and Brian Cage to make their way out to the ring. And JR with one of the most, very correct calls of the night. Why is Brian Cage wearing a shirt? Like, if I wouldn't wear one either. You gotta show off the goods, man. You gotta show off that machine-like physique. Anyway, Taz says, they're not upset that Moxley pushed the thing back a week and whatever politicking he did. They're easy. Taz knocks Moxley for not coming to Jacksonville to get tested for COVID after he's been tested twice at home. He also takes a kind of a shot at WWE for their lax testing policy, even though it doesn't mention them by name. And he says, Moxley has a case of the chicken shits because he's afraid of what Cage is going to do to him. Again, I like the promo. Only problem I had with it was, why is Cage wearing a shirt? Main event time for the AEW tag titles as Hangman Page and Kenny Omega defend against the best friends who have the best entrance of the year, in my opinion, as they come rolling up in Trent's mom's minivan. That was pretty epic. Go Sue. FTR show up as the match begins with beach chairs, and they hang out by the announce table with beer. Like, Dash Harwood is drinking beer and chewing gum. That's kind of gross, right? The match starts out kind of slow, but it picks up once Chuck Taylor takes to the air. A great moment where he and Trent huck Omega into the barricade / Hangman Page at the same time. More great back and forth. The last call is avoided. They hit Paige with a strong zero, which Omega barely breaks up. There's some close calls here where Trent almost wins, but Paige hits a deadeye and a buckshot lariat to win the match and retain for his team. Then afterward, FTR come to the ring and they want to give beers to the winners. Paige immediately takes his, and Omega, he pours his beer out because of course he doesn't drink. So FTR sees the disrespect. The Young Bucks come in to try and break things up, and they get between the two teams. But very interesting because Omega is behind the Young Bucks and Paige is behind FTR. Curiouser and curiouser as we fade to black. I will say, of the two main events of the evening, I think this one was the not quite as good but still good matchup. But I think that, Io Shirai and Sasha, I should say, was a stronger main event. And before my voice finally gives out, time for me to figure out which show won for the week. Which night one of the special themed shows for the next 2 weeks won this first opening salvo, NXT or AEW? I'm going to give it to NXT. I think both shows were entertaining, and I think we're dead even in the number of things I liked and disliked / didn't care for so much across both shows. But I think the overall enjoyment that I got from the matches and the overall quality of the matches, I think goes to NXT this week. Even though AEW, like I said, was very entertaining in its own right. Even the cons that I have listed for both shows weren't bad matches per se, just in my opinion, the weakest ones of the night. No matter what side of the fence you're on, if you're an AEW fan or an NXT fan or whatever, or if you like both stuff, at least take comfort in knowing that the next couple of weeks you're going to have some great matches. Even if you're a diehard one or the other fan, it's it's part of the ratings war, but it's like they're both bringing their A game here and trying to do their best stuff. And I think that we saw that on this night. Can't wait to see how week 2 goes down. But let me know what you thought about AEW and NXT this week in the comment section below. Quick programming note, unfortunately, I will not be able to watch or review SmackDown this weekend, so you won't find my review of it either here or on Instagram Live. By the way, thank you to those who've been watching me on Instagram. But as early as next week, I will be back doing the SmackDown review, hopefully on the channel and hopefully live. That's what I'm going for here, is for a live SmackDown reviews beginning next Friday night. And because there's no SmackDown review this weekend, I'm going to make up for it by releasing an all-new Kayfabe Kitchen Friday morning, so be on the lookout for that. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.